I know. For the first time, a countdown timer. I know, I've been fiddling with the technology. Good evening and welcome to Shelf Analysis, episode 31. I think I should have looked this up beforehand, but I didn't. Episode 31 of the program tonight, coming to you from the new surrounds of our spare bedroom. Or what is normally now my wife's office these days. We've decided to kind of move around things ever so slightly. I mean, it gives you a bit of a different background to look at. It means you can look at the bookshelves in here and try and figure out the covers of things as we talk over the course of time. Also means the lighting is slightly better in here. It's only taken me 31 episodes to figure that one out. Thanks a million for joining us tonight live here in the Ricochet Book Club on Facebook. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're watching this later on the YouTube channel or on RTE Culture, either as well at some point later on. But again, thank you very much for involving yourself in this. I have a fantastic guest for you tonight. I have a few things to do before we get there, though. A few pieces of business before we do. First things first, let me see. I'm going to go with, yes, I went book shopping today. In a real bookshop. I physically walked into a door, nobody stopped me, and I went and browsed with impunity. Now, panic bought a little. So I ended up coming back with this. Maybe I can swap these around here. I think I can, yeah. So I bought a couple of bits and pieces, then ended up coming away with this. Bertrand Russell's The Problems of Philosophy. I feel like my life needs a little of that at the moment. It is only quite a thin one as well. I've been meaning to buy some Bertrand Russell for a while. I've never seen Jerry Toner's Infamy, The Crimes of Ancient Rome before. It's relatively new from what I could tell. It was on one of the new tables. Grabbed that, thought it looked really interesting. I've always meant to read Banana Yoshimoto. So Kitchen is up there in the top right-hand corner as well as part of my continuing love of Japanese literature. And the one at the top, Khaled Khalifa's Death is Hard Work, seems fantastic. It's a novel. It's set in contemporary Syria. There were one or two other little bits and pieces I got, which I'll tell you about over the course of time as well. But, you know, if you're anything like me, and odds are given that you're currently watching a chat show about books, you probably love your books, and it was just the joy today for the first time since the beginning of March to be able to walk into an actual bookstore and go, I'm going to browse. I'm going to find 4 things, as I did there, that I'd absolutely no intention of buying prior to entering the shop, and came away with them when I did. It was genuinely lovely. There are other things going on as well in the book world. Let me show you this as well. You may or may not have seen it. It is time for the Easons must-reads for summer 2020. 8 books, all chosen by myself and Sinead Moriarty for you to read all across the course of the summer. Sinead's 4 are at the bottom. My 4 are at the top. You'll have heard me rattle on about my 4 before many, many, many times. Mark O'Connell's Notes from an Apocalypse. The Nisha Dolan's Exciting Times, Liz Nugent's Our Little Cruelties, and C-Pam Zhang's How Much of These Hills is Gold. 3 of mine who've actually been on Shelf Analysis previously. Actually, now that I look at the bottom, Maggie O'Farrell's been on Shelf Analysis, and so has Ruth Gilligan as well. So 5 out of 8 is not bad in terms of having had people on the show. The videos are all on my social media feeds if you want to go and have a look there, and you'll find them on Eason's social media feeds as well, and on the Eason's website too. Only launched since Monday. They are the 8 Eason's must-read books for summer 2020, and again, physically available in actual real shops, which in and of itself is a joy, of course. I'm going to bring you not down here into up here. Yeah, I'm just going to bring you this one next. It is time for Karina. Karina is the show's houseplant. Every night, Karina is reading a brand new book. Not sure what she's reading this time around. Let's find out. Karina, what are you reading? This explains a lot. Hello, Karina. How are you feeling? Just, wave gently the way you always do. You seem to be reading the University Challenge quiz book, which is probably because in the house recently, if you hear me talk about this either on the radio or on social, quiz shows are off at the moment. So there's no Only Connect, there's no University Challenge, they're all out of season, and I got a little bit stir crazy. So at the moment I'm actually watching, I think, series 38 of University Challenge on YouTube. That's what a fun night is in my house. And Karina's attempting to play catch up. Yeah, you're enjoying it though, Karina. It's all good, yeah? Fantastic. That's deep breaths. You'll be okay. Thank you, Karina. That's been knocking around for a while. I haven't seen that book in a while. I was wondering where that was. One thing worth mentioning for you as well, perhaps when you finish up here this evening, we'll be finished in and around 7:30, as we always are. 2 former guests on the show have their own event on tonight, which is worth pointing out to you. Keelan Hughes' The Wild Laughter, her brand new novel, is out tomorrow. And she's going to be talking to Sarah Perry on Instagram Live on the Waterstones Instagram live. That is tonight, 7:30. As soon as we finish here, you can hop over to Instagram and see two of my favorite people having a conversation with each other. I think that's all the business. I think that's the early bits and pieces. I think so. At the tail end of this, I will let you know who's coming up on next week's shelf analysis, because we held a little poll in the book club as to whether or not you liked the idea of it being a surprise and simply, you just turn up and whoever's here is here, or you'd like to be told. Overwhelmingly, weirdly, people liked to be told about who's coming up next week. Next week as well is the first time we've actually pre-recorded a shelf analysis. So it's already done. It's pre-recorded for reasons of it being in another part of the world and to fit in with the writer's daytime writing schedule as well. I'll tell you about that at the very end of shelf analysis. Tonight, I'm thrilled to get to talk to my guest tonight, primarily because I think Cloud Atlas was the first of his books that I read. I remember going into Cloud Atlas. I remember being befuddled. I remember putting it down. I remember picking it up again, becoming more befuddled, then finding myself lost in its world, and then coming out at the end of it and eulogizing about it to everybody around. Pretty much the same thing with The Thousand Autumns of Jacob DeZoet. His new book, which turned up in the most beautiful proof, which I think I've showed previously on this program a little while back, is absolutely stellar. And it's already a book I've started pointing people towards. Not only that, but I think I read it in about 3 days. It is an absolutely perfect read for summer 2020, and it's out in a few weeks. So it is my pleasure to press this button here. Hopefully, it's always a bit of a fingers crossed thing, and say, David Mitchell, good evening and welcome to Shelf Analysis. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you very much, Rick, and thank you for those very flattering things you said about my writing there.
Entirely deserved.
You're too good. Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here in these strange circumstances.
Firstly, tell me about the headphones, because those are gamers' headphones, right?
They are, yes. Well, one of the unforeseen implications of lockdown is the time to have a little taste at state-of-the-art video game. Now, in my head, video games are basically what they were in the 80s and the 90s on my ZX Spectrum, but just massively more complex. Little did I know, and it took me only a quarter of a century to catch on, but they've pretty much evolved into art forms, the best of them, in their own right, and new ways to get lost, get immersed in narrative. And I'm working through one, and it takes hundreds of hours, but one called Red Dead Redemption 2, and it is absolutely glorious. So this is a little investment for me, and the character's name is Arthur Morgan. As you go on missions and on quests, or just wandering around the world in that game, it's a revelation for me. It really is.
I'm fairly sure when people kind of tuned into the program tonight, they were not necessarily expecting you to be having a conversation about Red Dead Redemption and about computer gaming in general. Is this genuinely a kind of a very, very recent development for you?
It's about 12 weeks old. Yeah.
Okay.
I just had no idea really what modern video games were, how beautiful they were, how richly developed the characters are, how many layers of plots there are. Now, in the old days, I think opera was called the total art form. It had music, it had visuals, it had singing, of course, it had orchestration, it had acting, it had plots. Of course, opera is still opera, and it does things, reaches the parts only opera can reach. But a state-of-the-art modern video game has as legitimate a claim to that title of the total art form.
We talked about this a little earlier when we were doing our technical check earlier today, and I did say to you that I used to be a gamer, probably like you, with a kind of ZX Spectrum, right the way all back to my little Atari 2600 with its tiny little joystick. And I would have gotten back into gaming years ago, but I have a huge fear that I would simply find it completely compelling and it would take over my life.
Yeah, I did too.
And yet here we are.
And yet here we are. If you really let it take over your life, then sort of you would lose your wife and family and house and everything would kind of go. Obviously, that's I want to keep these things even more than I enjoy playing the game. So I limit myself to a mere 5 hours a week, usually on one massive weekend Red Dead binge when I just eat and play and I have my 18-year-old on the sofa. So if I ever get into a really risky gunfight and I need the skills to sort of shoot my way out of it, then I whimper like the digital coward I am.
You have backup just in case. Yeah,
yeah. It's not a constant shoot 'em up kind of activity though. This is also what I wasn't expecting. Just the aesthetics of it. You can, if you want to, avoid trouble for hours on end and just go fishing, and the day passes and the sun travels across the sky and the weather changes. And if there was one scene in a town, I was reading a book and another character passed in front of me and the shadow of the character fell across the paper. The level is that insanely, well, not insanely, but it's that hyper realistically worked out. I'm a new convert. Life will never be the same again. Next, it's Detroit.
Yeah, I'm having a moment where I'm thinking that, you know, at some point 3 or 4 years down the line, you and I are going to be either having a conversation about some sort of incredibly immersive video game that you've written the script for, or it will become a major plot point in something that you've written. I can see that easily happening.
That's how I justified it to myself when I forked out for the machine and the game, which are not nothing. They are a whole new way of approaching narrative, or an amalgamation of old ways of approaching narrative. And this is what art has always done, of course. I mean, and things evolve, materials evolve. When before the age of sailing ships, there was nothing to paint on really apart from wood. But then suddenly you had canvas being made for sails. It had to be good, and it had to be cheap, and it had to be easy to get. And suddenly people started painting on that. And in a not totally dissimilar way, all these centuries later, IT gets invented and developed, and it becomes cheaper, and the invention often happens before the applications for it become apparent. But yeah, have a go. That's all I say. Have a go.
You know, all I'm going to do is, and I'm fully aware my wife is watching this right now.
Just a little.
David Mitchell told me to. Really, then I suppose you've answered at least part of the question. But the question I normally ask people is as to how they've been coping with the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks. It's now whatever 12 weeks of where we are. So what's your life been like over the space of the time since March?
We live in West Cork. You're Irish. You don't need me to explain how beautiful it is here. Even when the lockdown radius was at its shortest, we've got the sea just down the road. We've got the countryside. We've got the woods. There's always been food in the supermarket. We've got gardens and space, and we've been going into a nice zone of the year weather-wise as well. So it just seems rude to people in a block of flats in a city with no garden to begin to think about complaining. It's been nice spending more time with the kids and family, and I've been reading a lot. I've been busy as well. A couple of, if I'm honest, 4 friends in film who I've talked about working with for years, but it's never happened because either I was chasing a deadline or they were in a shoot. We've never had free time at the same time. we've just been we've been working on things and Zooming all day, and of course now my publicists are inventing this entirely new, half tempted to call it an art form, but the digital book tour. How do you promote a book like this one, for example, Utopia Avenue?
I'm getting there. Anyways, and to be honest with you, this is genuinely the joy of doing this, because prior to lockdown, while I do the book show on Radio 1, and while I do events at festivals around the country, which are always to a certain number of audience, now all of a sudden I can talk to people who are on the far side of the world, or I can talk to people who maybe necessarily wouldn't make it here for events like this, and I wouldn't necessarily have the chance to talk to. And I get to talk to them about their wonderful new book, which is called Utopia Avenue, which is right here. This is the bit where you tell me about the book and about maybe a little bit about where it came from and about what happens.
I'm a bit of a rabbit in the headlights, because normally at this stage in the publicity cycle, I would have done this lots of times, and I have a neat list of bullet points in my head of zingers that I can just reel off and give you a great.
I don't mind being your test audience. That's fine.
Fine. In that case, if you don't mind being a friendly and good-natured guinea pig, then Utopia Avenue is about a band called Utopia Avenue, who are sort of curated into existence by quite a wily operator in Soho in London in 1967. There's a woman who's come out of the folk scene. There's a fairly Syd Barrett-y, esoteric, psychedelic guitarist. There's a bassist who may or may not bear a passing resemblance to Ray Davis. That's a pub rock, R&B black band. And a drummer who I had 4 pictures of on my computer when I was writing it, and the one for the drummer was the guy from Cream, Ginger Baker.
Ginger Baker. I was thinking John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. That was my thought in my head. Oh, and he's disappeared. Oh, that's technology for you. Don't worry, we'll hold on and he'll turn up back again in a minute. I may as well tell you, Willis, what happens then throughout the courses of the rest of the book. It is set in the 1960s. The band then find their way, or don't find their way, from being a really small band to becoming something bigger, to potentially taking over the world. And there are lots of resonances with David's other books in there as well. While he's gone, it's brilliant. I've enjoyed it immensely. It is one of those books that I've rattled on to people about. And while it is thick, at the same time, you will absolutely find yourself rattling through it very easily. The book is called Utopia Avenue, and it's by David Mitchell, who in theory hopefully is in West Cork, and his broadband hasn't just disappeared, and in which case this will be the shortest shelf analysis of all time. So we could always just twiddle our thumbs and just wait for him to turn up again, which is always a possibility. How are you doing? All right. If you want to stick a question or a comment below, I can, believe me, I'm on live daytime radio every day. I can fill for as long as we need to here. Thank you, Don Jimmy, saying that Number 9 Dream is one of his favorite books of all time. I very much like that. David Bridgman, fair point. Games are just another form of storytelling. I know. And the problem is, like Pringles, once I pop, I can't stop. I have my fear. Speaking of which, thank goodness, because to be honest with you, if I had to keep talking for much longer, you guys would get very bored of me. There's your West Cork internet for you, sir.
Hey.
Now it's back and you're back. To be honest with you, while you were away, I just filled in the rest of the book, and I told everybody what happens throughout the course of the rest of the book, and I gave out the denouement as well, and I ruined it for everybody.
I could hear you the whole time, actually, Rick. But so.
You were still here. That's fantastic. That's and you know, it is a fantastic book. To be honest with you as well, one of the things that I took most from it is the playlisting that goes on throughout it, because obviously band members reference either things that are happening around them or other bands they're interested in, or you know, they bump into other people on the music scene. You could make a very, very tasty playlist just from the people who are peripherally involved in this.
Funny you should mention that, because on Spotify I did indeed put together a playlist. It's called Utopia Avenue.
I'm just setting them up.
There's 1 and 2 suggested by the readers. So this is just a publicity fest for me at the moment. I've got a bit of an echo on my headphones. I'll just see if it works. Take them off.
Yeah, you press buttons there and see that. Does that make a difference, or has that made it worse? Frankly, do I now sound like I'm as, you know, somewhere on the other side of the planet? Is that better?
You sound fine. However, I am getting my own voice back to me about a second later, which
It
is
could be
really
coming
weird.
from your headphones. Let's do tech support
experience.
live.
So I will go out and come back in again.
You
so
go out and come back in. Take your time.
20 seconds.
We're not in a hurry here.
Away
Take
you
your
go.
time. Take your time, young man. You go for that. Because technology does this. That goes there, this goes here, and then he disappears. It's fine. I'll ask you questions of him again in a minute. Do you like the room? Do you like the surrounds? I just, it looks better. The light's nicer. I was getting bored with sitting in the sitting room all the time, and I know a lot of people liked the backdrop at the back. I will tell you about who's coming up at the next one as well, because Shelf Analysis next week is pre-recorded, thankfully. And as a result of which we won't have technical problems like this. Yeah, this is episode 31. This was bound to happen at some point. I will have a look at the Spotify playlist as well. I think if you look up Utopia Avenue on Spotify, there are a number of playlists, including one made by David himself, because I did glance by and see it at some stage. So we'll find more about that as soon as he returns, which he has as and of right now. Let's try. Did you try turning it on and off again?
That's essentially exactly what I did, and it's worked perfectly.
Brilliant.
It's the ancient method. I'm back.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before we get into the books that you're going to recommend. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just on the basis of stuff people have sent in. Owen says, and it's an interesting question, how much of an influence David Bowie has on the novel? Because I mean, I've read it, and he turns up quite in these quite perfect little moments.
Thank you. Well, Owen, he turns up, I think, twice, 2 or 3 times for pretty brief cameos. But all of the cameos, I wanted them to be slightly more than that. I didn't want them to be just in walks a famous person. Oh, look, there's a famous person. And that be pretty much it, just hanging there like a Christmas tree decoration. I do need to give them a reasonably valid purpose for being there, so they say something or they do something which slightly alters the trajectory, at least of the scene, and maybe the scene will alter the trajectory of the chapter. However, I also didn't want to novelize them, so it's in no way a novel about David Bowie. It is about the world that he moved in, the world in part he made a smallish contribution to bringing about. 67, so it's sort of before he really became famous. He was, as a fan you probably know, but for quite a while he was the next big thing, but he never actually became the next big thing. And he had quite a sort of long, lonely, artistic walk up the path of Mount Fame before he began to gain any kind of altitude at all. So he's there in some ways for dramatic irony. We know what he'll be. He has no idea yet. He won't. He just has he's running on willpower. He's running on a determination that he just can't go back to where he's from. But the breaks haven't happened. He made a record, but it didn't sell. So he's sort of he's around as a slightly alien presence, but he's not really there as the mega famous David Bowie that became in the 70s and in later decades.
And part of me definitely doesn't want to ruin any of the other characters, real people who turn up later on in the book as well, because there are beautiful moments where they just appear, they make the kind of pivot they have to, and then they kind of disappear. So I want to be quite cautious about not really talking about who else turns up later in the book.
So we won't mention Leonard Cohen or Janis Joplin at all, and definitely not Syd Barrett, or
Francis Bacon.
Or Francis Bacon.
That's fine. Okay, good. Yeah. One question before we get to this. Emer asks, and I think this is a great question because I've adored Cloud Atlas for a really long time. I meet an equal number of people who say, her question is there a certain way to approach Cloud Atlas? I mean, other than head on.
I couldn't really think of another way apart from just reading it from the beginning and working through to the end, really. If you're not used to 19th century diction, then I do get that. And it would be a bit like the first time I was 15 years old and introduced to Jane Austen. I was thinking, like, why is everyone talking like this? It's intolerable. But if your ear is kind of in for 19th century language, then it shouldn't be too nightmarish. You also have to get used to the idea that the book will interrupt itself 6 times. However, trust me, there's a payoff once you start moving out from the centre to the other side. So essentially, for Ema, it's sort of a question as to whether you're going to trust, whether you think I have an honest face or not.
Yep. I think I found exactly the same thing. Once you reach the center point and it starts to unravel in the opposite direction, that's the moment where you go, ah. Look, ostensibly you are here to recommend 3 books for us.
Cool.
Tell me what again, the criteria is they can be absolutely anything once. I don't ever put any kind of box on this. So what have you chosen for us?
First, a book that I read first when I was 12 years old, and I've read it since about once a decade. Read it to my daughter when she was of an age of when she enjoyed having her dad read to her. And it is The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe. Have you read this, Rick?
No, not at all.
Grand. Then it's just brilliant. It's set in Roman Britain. I prepared some notes. I hope you don't mind if I slightly glance occasionally.
Please do.
Waste everyone's time with and imprecise or imprecision.
Well, my thought is you've done preparation, which is more than most guests do for this show. This is very impressive.
This is home turf, so I don't want to let the side down, It's about a Roman officer called Marcus Aquila who travels north of Hadrian's Wall to discover the truth about the 9th Legion, in which his father served. This was a mutinous legion. In the days, there was something north of Hadrian's Wall for a short time. There was a war between the Firth of Forth and the Firth of Clyde, sort of the next narrower neck of Scotland up. And for a short time, that was officially Roman territory, although the tribes that lived there might have had a different slant on things. Within this area, the 9th Legion was annihilated, and crucially, its bronze eagle standard was lost. So, in comes the book. Marcus and his native British right-hand man, Esker, got to travel through Scotland, what is now Scotland, discover the fate of the 9th Legion and its all-important bronze eagle. And they have to find it and bring it back. So at that level, it's a quest. However, it is just great. The characters have got a psychological dimensionality. They're not Roman cliches. They're real people who think like we might. They're not. I love it. Then I love all of her work. She eschews the superhero. Rosemary Sutcliffe herself, she was in a wheelchair pretty much all her life. She was a classicist. She was a painter of miniatures. And these imbue her work with the very essence, I think. Pretty much all of her protagonists, they've got something wrong with them. They've got from one point of view, they have some form of disability or impediment. Marcus is half lame, the protagonist here, after a battle injury. So she sort of shows how their disabilities, and in a world that was even more unforgiving than ours is about disabilities, they make them what they are. They actually enable the character and therefore enable the story to happen. It's always an underdog's view of the world, and they were written. This was written in 1954, and it's been in print ever since, which says something. And I love how compared to we are in a golden age of young adult fiction, of kids fiction as well. I think there's more than there's ever been. Kind of, it's like a number of photos thanks to iPhone. There's more great books for kids, and this isn't just for kids. I have to say, it's beautifully written. What I like about it is it doesn't feel designed at all. It's purely great writing. No, the vocabulary isn't modified for kids. You can't detect any creative workshop. Sorry, I'll try again. You can't detect any creative writing workshops behind it. It's purely what she wanted to write. This is her story. This is how she wanted to tell it. It's old school, but I kind of like that. If I could give us a little reading, would that work, Rick?
Please do, absolutely.
Then this is what I mean about the psychological dimensionality of the characters. This is a section towards the end of the book, after a lot of the actions happened, and Marcus and his kind of sidekick, they're rather more than a sidekick, who used to be a slave in the house that Marcus is now in, they have this encounter. Following the two older men, and once again carrying the eagle, Marcus had mounted 4 or 5 of the watchtower steps before he realised that Esker was not coming up behind, and looking back, he saw him standing still at the foot of the stairs. "I think I will not come," Esker said. "Not come?" Marcus came down a few steps again. "It is between the 4 of us. What maggot has got into your head, Esker?" "I think that I should not go to your uncle's private sanctum," Esker said stubbornly. "I have been a slave in his house." "But you're not a slave now." "No, I am your freedman now, and it is strange. I never thought of that until this evening." Marcus had never thought of it either, but he knew that it was true. You could give a slave his freedom, but nothing could undo the fact that he had been a slave, and between him, a freedman, and any free man who had never been unfree, there would still be a difference. Wherever the Roman way of life held good, that difference would be there. That was why it had not mattered all these months that they'd been away. That was why it mattered now. Suddenly, he felt baffled and helpless. "You did not feel like this before we went north. How is it altered now?" "That was at the beginning. I had not time to understand. I knew only that I was free. The hound slipped from the leash, and we were going away from it all in the morning. And now we have come back." Yes, they had come back. And the thing that had got to be faced, and faced at once. On a sudden impulse, Marcus reached out his free hand and caught his friend's shoulder, not at all gently. "Listen to me," he said. "Are you going to live all the rest of your life as though you had taken a whipping and could not forget it? Because if you are, I am sorry for you. You don't like being a freedman, do you? Well, I don't like being lame. And that makes 2 of us. And the only thing we can do about it, you and I, is to learn to carry the scars lightly." He gave the shoulder a friendly shake and dropped his hand. "Come up with me now, Esker." Esker did not answer for a moment. "I will come," he said.
That's fantastic. Oh, no, at the very end of his reading, lads, we're going to persist with this for as long as it takes. I'm hoping you can still hear me, David. Maybe you can still hear me, but you've disappeared off screen for wherever it is you've gone. Oh, God, I hate technology. That was fantastic. And now you're back, apparently. So let me press another button here. Okay, so you're going to disappear out and back in again. Okay, let's make that happen. Okay. It's worth it for 2 more of those. Can I say to future authors on Shelf Analysis, if you want to do a bit of a reading, please do so. Also, if you fancy, prepping notes in advance, please do so as well. I think we've got you back. Let me try pressing one more time. Here we go. Yeah, that's it. You're back and you're in. That's magnificent. Remind me of the title of the book one more time, please, before we move on.
The Eagle of the Ninth.
Eagle of the Ninth.
Rosemary Sutcliffe.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, while we
it's that good all the way through as well.
While we have the technology continuing to work, then what's book number 2?
This is a little bit embarrassing. We didn't arrange this beforehand, but I saw on your recommendations. I'm sorry, Rick, but I've got Hamnet.
That's okay. Fantastic. You're not the first person to talk about it. Tell me.
Really? Yeah. Well, just casually. It is about Shakespeare's family in Stratford-on-Avon. While the ambitious man of the house is away making a name for himself in the big city, it focuses on Agnes, Shakespeare's wife, Judith, Shakespeare's daughter, and the twin sister of his son Hamnet. Both Agnes and Judith have what we would call second sight, I think. Susanna, Shakespeare's other daughter, or the both Shakespeare and Agnes's other daughter is more practical and grounded in this world, and Shakespeare's mother, Joan, who's a formidable woman who can't always control her cruel streak. It's about the trajectory of their provincial lives, either side of the BC and the AD of a crucial event, which is the death of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, who, it is suggested, in another worldly kind of way, died in Judith's place. It's also a great portrait of a marriage, many aspects of which can be slightly awkwardly familiar to me and many of us, especially a marriage where one of the partners is possessed by another world, in the same way that Shakespeare's possessed by the world that he writes about and spends most of his time in. I'm not quite sure, not comparing myself to Shakespeare, but I've been half recommending that my wife reads this and half kind of not, because I think some of it might be painfully familiar. The language is great. It's cliche-less. Maggie O'Farrell she can't write a bad sentence. She can't. She's profoundly emotionally intelligent. Well, any form of intelligence you like, she's it. She's done such a great job on this. The language is perfect. It's not Blackadder English, but it just walks that perfect fine line. When I was working on historical fiction myself, I thought of it as lest and in case line. So if you say, take an umbrella lest it rains, it sounds a little bit, but then if you're reading something set in Shakespeare's English, take an umbrella, if they had umbrellas, take something in case it rains, that also, that sort of just pokes you a little bit with something's not quite right there. That's the problem. And Maggie O'Farrell, she just solves it every time. I just love this book. Would you like a little reading?
Absolutely. If you're gonna continue the tradition, then absolutely. Okay. Let's very much.
This is apologies to Maggie, who would probably do a much better job of me than this, but it was really hard to find one thing. I could open this book at any page and read that, and it would be really good. However, I've chosen a scene again towards the end of the book where Judith, Hamnet's twin sister, Hamnet's been dead a number of years now, and Judith, she still has this connection, I guess, with the spirit world. It's not a supernatural book. She never goes into fantasy, but she sometimes becomes, she takes a few steps in that direction. You kind of feel its presence, which is pretty much what happens here. Judith still yearns just to make one connection, just the once, with her dead brother. And it's night, and she goes out looking for some kind of, if not his ghost, then at least the ghost of his ghost. And this is what she finds. Please, is what she is thinking. Please come, just once. Don't leave me here like this, alone. Please. I know you took my place, but I'm only half a person without you. Let me see you, even if only for the last time. She cannot imagine how it might be to see him again. He would be a child, and she is now grown, almost a woman. What would you think? Would you recognise her now, if he were to pass her in the street, this boy who will forever remain a boy? Several streets away, the owl leaves its perch, surrendering itself to a cool draught, its wings silently breasting the air, its eyes alert. To it, the town, it's like ingenious. To it, it's like to wit. It's just poetry. To it, the town appears as a series of rooftops with gullies of streets in between, placed to be navigated. The massed leaves of trees present themselves as it flies, the stray wisps of smoke from idle fires. God, this is good. It sees the progress of the fox, which is now crossing the street. It sees a rodent, possibly a rat, traversing a yard and disappearing down into a pit. It sees a man. sleeping in the doorway of a tavern, scratching at a flea bite on his shin. It sees conies in a cage at the back of someone's house, horses standing in a paddock near the inn, and it sees Judith stepping into the street. She is unaware of the owl skimming the sky above her. Her breath comes into her body in ragged, shallow bursts. She has seen something, a flicker, a hint, a motion, imperceptible, but there, unmistakably. It was like the passage of a breeze through corn, like the glancing of a reflection off a pane when you pull the window towards you, that unexpected streak of light passing through the room. Judith crosses the road, her hood falling from her head. She stands outside her former home. So Judith crosses the road, her hood falling from her head. She stands outside her former home. She paces from its door to that of her grandparents'. The very air feels coalescent, charged, as it does before a thunderstorm. She shuts her eyes. She can feel him. She is so sure of this. The skin on her arms and neck shrinks. She is desperate to reach out, to touch him, to take his hand in hers. But she dares not. She listens to the roar of her pulse, her ragged breathing, and she knows, she hears, underneath her own, another's breathing. She does. She really does. She is shaking now, her head bowed, her eyes shut tight. The thought that forms inside her head is, I miss you. I miss you. I would give anything to have you back. Anything at all. Then it is over. The moment passing. The pressure drops like a curtain. She opens her eyes, puts her hand up to the wall of the house to steady herself. He is gone. All over again.
I'm going to do this on behalf of everybody who's watching, because they're doing it in front of their laptops. It's both an incredible piece of prose and read beautifully as well. You're 100% right. That is one of the books of 2020.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great? It's now you read things, they start off really good, and generally somewhere they sag, they dip, and that's fine. That's fine in a novel. They are multi-speed things. They are forgiving, baggy, capacious forms. But Hamnet, it never loses it once, not even half a page, not once. And
I think if people want to see Maggie talk about it as well, she was a guest here about 4 or 5 weeks ago on Shelf Analysis. They can watch the piece with her. She talks a little bit about it and makes her own recommendations there as well. But 100% right on that. Okay, you've done well with the first two so far. What's the last one going to be? This is the finale.
Well, I'm staying in the past. I'm moving out of fiction, and I'm going to present to you. You might recognise the artwork.
That's beautiful.
And Letters of Vincent van Gogh.
Fantastic.
These are exactly what it says. It's the Letters of Vincent van Gogh, whose dates, as you all know, were 1853 to 1890. The first of the letters in this book is from 1873, so he's 20 years old. I love this book because it's very unlike my other two choices. It's not fiction. There's several things at once. They are letters written by an itinerant black sheep of a respectable Dutch family to mostly his younger brother Theo between 1873 and his death, and Vincent's death in 1890. Probably only Theo knew him. Probably only Theo really loved him. They're moving. They're tender. They're everything he was. They are irascible. They are sometimes monotonous. They're a wonderful mix of a human personality. That's the first thing the letters are. They're also windows into Van Gogh's life and mind. Neither this life nor the mind were particularly happy ones, as you will know. Van Gogh knew his calling, but unfortunately for him, the art world of his time did not agree that it was his calling, which provides pathos and challenge and texture. He did what he did without any encouragement, and that makes it more special and harsher than the letters and his life and his work perhaps would have been had he been an early overnight sensation.
Don't worry, he'll be back in a minute. It's just the way technology works. And this is just, I'm enjoying this possibly more immensely than I have done in anything in quite some time. Well, hang on, he'll be back in a minute. And I'm going to go out and buy the letters of Vincent van Gogh anyway, just off the back of that. It's okay, he's back. All right, here we go. You got there. You were mid-flow. You were mid-flow.
Well, like Van Gogh's life, these little speed bumps we hit might cause us to go around interesting sideways and byways. Of course, the letters aren't a novel, and unlike, say, some 18th century letters in the Samuel Johnson set, they certainly weren't written to ever be seen by anyone other than their recipient. So there's no eye on posterity with these letters, and they aren't for everyone. They aren't always an easy read. They do form a kind of a narrative, but just the narrative at the speed of life. It hasn't been curated to turn it into a cool screenplay or even a Don McLean song. They are like. That said, you get the sense of a narrative in the same way that you might get the sense of the overall shape of a vase from some of its smashed shards. The letters are, of course, like a dramatic irony burger. We know how he died on the 27th of July with a revolver through his heart, although it took him a couple of days for those injuries to finally claim him. And we also know that he achieved a greater level of fame than literally he could ever have dreamed of. He's one of the most famous artists of our civilization, and if still around in 2,000 years, 5,000 years, perhaps he'll be one of the most famous artists of all civilizations that come along. Finally, I love the letters because they are a myth buster. They're a myth stripper. These letters are him, and only him. There's no interlocutor, there's no art critic, there's no Wikipedia page. There's not even us. There's just him, just this bloke writing to his brother, mortified that he's not making a success of this art thing, apologising to his brother that his brother has to keep sending him art materials and money to keep him going. And the love, we just get the love between the two of them. And it should be said, Theo's wife, Jo, who kept these letters, and that's the reason why they still exist and why there's so many of them. Letters that people that he wrote to people, they tend not to survive because he was this screwball, not altogether pleasant person to have around, and the letters went the way of most things. But Jo, Theo's wife, kept them, so she deserves a little endnote in this story as well. Having said that, you won't be surprised. Might I just read you a short sample?
I would be disappointed if you didn't, if you want me to be honest with you. So please.
I'm not outstaying my welcome here. We're only
this is, to be honest with you, I've got comments coming in from people saying this is the best shelf analysis we've done yet. Kathy says, I love the sheer joy expressed here about literature. So, you take it.
My head's just swelling. It's not going to be good for me. So
best not to think about it then. Okay, off you go.
This is from in 1888 when Van Gogh was on his, artistically at least, it was all coming together for him, and this masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. And he didn't know they were masterpieces, and no one told him they were. And how would he know? But it's from this period kind of towards the end of his life. And here we go. My dear Thea, at last I am sending you a small sketch to give you at least an idea of the form which the work is taking. For today, I am all right again. My eyes are still tired, but then I had a new idea in my head, and here is a sketch of it. Another canvas of size 30. This time it's just simply my bedroom. Only here, colour is to do everything, and giving by its simplification a grander style to things is to be suggested here of rest or of sleep in general. In a word, to look at the picture ought to rest the brain, or rather the imagination. The walls are pale violet. The floor is of red tiles. The wood of the bed and chairs is the yellow of fresh butter. The sheets and pillows are very light lemon green. The coverlet scarlet, the window green, the toilet table orange, the basin blue, the doors lilac, and that is all. There is nothing in this room with closed shutters. The broad lines of the furniture must, again, express inviolable rest. Portraits on the walls, and a mirror and a towel and some clothes. The frame, as there is no white in the picture, will be all white. This by way of revenge for the enforced rest I have been obliged to take. I shall work at it again all day tomorrow, but you see how simple the conception is. The shadows and the throne shadows are suppressed. It is coloured in 3 flat tones, like Japanese prints. It is going to be a contrast with, for example, the Tarascon Diligence and the Night Cafe. I'm not writing you a long letter because tomorrow, very early, I'm going to begin in the cool morning light so as to finish my canvas. How are the pains? Do not forget to tell me about them. I hope that you will write one of these days. I will make you sketches of the other rooms too someday, with a good handshake. Yours, Vincent. And here is the picture he was talking about. Pretty famous. Moving in. I should mention this is the folio edition. And so you might need to hunt around for a second-hand copy, but there's a good Penguin edition of all the letters. But this is really good because it's got the artworks. It's got the canvases he's describing,
which is crucial. Yeah, absolutely. Can I say just before we finish tonight that this has been the absolute joy that I had hoped that it would have been.
Me too.
I
Thank you.
genuinely could not have asked for this to have been more. We've talked for pretty much twice our allocated time, and I'd be glad to have you come on for another 30 minutes and talk about more. To be fair, I've had a couple of commenters already saying, do you think David would come back and do this weekly, where you could just come on and read other people's work? You have work of your own to deal with game playing.
Well, thank you to whoever said that. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me just turn your piece of string into a very long piece of elastic.
Not at all, my pleasure. Utopia Avenue is an absolute joy. If people get the chance to get your hands on copies of it, is it out as of yet? It's not out physically in the real world yet. It's in the next couple of weeks.
It's isn't it? July the 14th.
July 14th. Okay.
This is just one my publisher sent early. It just arrived about 3 hours ago, so it never quite wears off when you work on a book for years and years and you go through all the stages, and then just one day, oh hello.
Up it turns.
I have to show the end papers as well because.
Oh, fantastic!
Isn't that cool? Great designer.
Because I've got I'm trying to figure out if I can pull up a copy of it here. I don't know if I can or not, because I have my original proof is here somewhere, because the proofs that were sent out to us, sometimes proofs can be nice, they can be pretty, they can be interesting. Sometimes proofs that are sent out are stellar and are absolutely beautiful. And the ones that were sent out for yours, I don't know if I have a copy of it here somewhere, but I've definitely shown it on Shelf Analysis before. Wait for a moment, wait. This is joking not my wife turning up and giving me my Utopia Avenue. This is the proof, and that's the version that we were sent there as well. And that is just gorgeous, and it's got that lovely embossed thing about it as well. And yeah, you're fine. Yours is nicer than mine, but that's the original.
It is a nice proof. And nothing to do with me really. It's just I'm really blessed with. designers that my publishers work with. But
we should say an immense thanks to Elaine from Hachette, who's the one who put the two of us together for this. She was very kind to do so. David Mitchell, I don't want to let you go, but I have to, because you've got a real world to go back to, and I'm going to have a beer. This has been wonderful. David, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope we'll do this at some point in the real world.
Thank you very much, and goodbye wherever you are.
Thanks, David. Cheers. Thanks.
Bye
now. We have a problem now. I've got to go and do another show here next week, and it's not going to be that one, frankly. That was absolutely wonderful. Here's the thing about next week's show, is I already know what it is because I've done it already. It's the first time we've had to pre-record one of these, and it is with a man who's been writing books for longer than I've been alive. It is with the legendary author of The World According to Garp and Cider House Rules and Hotel New Hampshire, and he talks about his brand new book that's coming out in 2021 as well. Last night I talked to John Irving from his home in Canada, and that will be next week's shelf analysis. So next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we'll have a live show here, and part of it will be that pre-recorded interview with him, because to be honest with you, I didn't want to get in the way of his working day, because that's just not the way I do these things. Thanks a million for joining us on Shelf Analysis tonight. You can catch all of the previous episodes on the YouTube channel. Just look up Shelf Analysis in YouTube. You'll find them all there, or you'll find them on RTE Culture as well, and you'll find them here in the Ricochet Book Club too. Thanks a million for joining us, and I'm going to go and have a little lie down now, and I'll see you again same time next week. Thanks for joining us.